Hello and welcome to the GMS Magazine podcast. I am Paco Garcia, your host, and this is a podcast all about role playing games, board games, and the people who make them. Sometimes the people who play them too. Um, Today, I am with Leland Andercheck, who, Leland, we got together in Blue Sky like a number of weeks ago, and life has been getting in the way and making it very hard for us to get together. And for transparency, this is the second attempt at the podcast because my audio equipment decided to do and no work anymore. So I have no idea what on earth was going on in there. But nevertheless, welcome to the show. It's great having you around. Um, okay, before we start talking about the game that's brought us together, because you say, hey, Paco, I have this awesome game, ChangedStars that we've written. Would you like to review it? And I say, well, maybe 300 pages on my tablet would be a bit too much for me, but at least we can talk about this and we can see what this game is and we can help people find it, which would be absolutely brilliant. But I also saw that you're doing a lot of other stuff with a pretty cool Twitch channel. So tell me a little bit about you and your team. Where do you all come from and what have you been doing until now?
Certainly. Change Stars is the sort of ultimate product of Diesel Shot thus far, which is a 50-50 partnership between Pat and I. Patrice is the artist who does all the lovely art and is the originator of the Change Star setting. I've been at it slightly longer, making games on my own, from 5e Dungeon Master Guild stuff when I was in college to my own games shortly after I graduated, Equity's age. I kind of thought about getting into the streaming space, ironically, as like a marketing measure. Of course, things don't happen overnight, and there's no such thing as a get rich or get red quick scheme in tabletop. So that didn't really pan out for Ada for a number of reasons, but we played games, we had fun, we shared it, and it slowly evolved with friends and colleagues we met along the way, both from like social media, various discords, and we ran some games, increasingly more indie games, and our own games over the years. So we have no exaggeration, like probably is one plural thousands of hours of actual play gameplay footage of Pat and I running games and playing games together. Uh, the games have been varied, but we are increasingly moving towards using it as a testing ground for released content, either games we're intending to release or modules. And yeah, it's been a blast. And it all really just came about when I asked Pat, "Hey, you want to stream playing some role playing games?" And she was like, "Yeah, sounds fun." And neither of us realized how much of a commitment that was. Um, and Yeah, it was been great though, and we are now sitting pretty, enjoying the fruits of our labors to an extent, but it's always a journey.
Oh, well, it definitely is. It definitely is. And tell me a little bit about a journey with Twitch, because I have to say, I have thought about Twitch for a long time. I've taken a quick look at it, and I've always felt so intimidated because of the amount of work that you have to put for Twitch to actually pay you the slightest bit of attention, because it is a fairly demanding platform. How have you found it since you started doing your channel and your actual plays?
So there's ebb and flow, and there are strategies to get seen, but ultimately, a lot of the way that people accrue new viewers, if you are quote unquote nobody and you're reliant on Twitch for the platform, which is a scary proposition, is that you obtain what are called category crawlers, who are, or I call them category crawlers, who are people who are just looking through any stream of a certain type. Because if you click on like a game, like D&D or whatever, it will show you, it used to at least, show you purely based on number of viewers, most to least. Now they've changed that since, but it's still a huge factor in how prominently are displayed and pushed across the site. Um, the tabletop role playing game categories really peaked during the hardest of the quarantine COVID years, and our peak was probably low 30s for a game of my first game, Acquisitions Age. But importantly, it was hacked to play a Fallout campaign.
Okay.
And I mean, we were this was right before and during the release of the Modifius 2D20 fall game. They're, oh, you play that? I'm like, no, we're not. We're not playing that, but thanks. And a lot of people who wouldn't tune in for a regular role playing game or D&D or anything like that were showing up for our Fallout game. And a lot of that, I mean, so we met some people there who would go on to be great fans of Change Stars and such. But a lot of it is there's an established IP. It's not really being addressed, and something like that can form a magnetic draw if you already have enough people sort of get yourself out the gate. Like, there's all sorts of tactics you can use, but at the end of the day, you need people to know who you are and care and show up before you are going to really get an appreciable number of strangers in any short period of time. Uh, it's one of those paradoxical scenarios where somebody back in the day ran the numbers. And I don't know how true this is, but on Twitter they claimed it was literally faster to get into Twitch as a video game streamer, stream for like build up an audience, convert 40% of or less of your video game audience to a tabletop audience because that's about how many would follow you, and that was going to get you viewers faster than starting out as a tabletop streamer. Uh, in many ways, for a lot of people, it's something that you look at that the person you already follow does in addition to what they're doing or that they change to. And I mean, from like a raw numbers perspective, like if someone came to me and said, "Oh, I would like to make money and promote my product. Should I become a Twitch streamer?" I would probably laugh, and
Mhm.
then I would probably say no. And then my third thing would be, it is, however, potentially a great source of fodder for short form video and e- example content and edited content on YouTube. So if you, more even than I, are willing and able to become very heavily invested in video editing and really tailor your stuff to be video editing exportable and like phone profile exportable and yada yada yada, then you probably have just about a good chance as anybody. Um, which is exists, so I
Mhm.
say.
That sounds like it requires an insane amount of time. How many hours a week do you all invest in your
So
Twitch?
so that's we're coming off of a hiatus right now, but there was a time when I was running 5 games a week. And it doesn't really matter. Like if I'm doing day of prep, it doesn't really matter how early I begin to stress about it, which is probably immediately. I
Mhm.
won't get meaningful work done until about 2 hours before we start.
Okay.
Um, no matter what else happens to be the case. So particular environment like that, 4 hour sessions. I mean, it was my night pretty much because you start 2 hours out, you run for 4 hours, and we were running until midnight Eastern, which is another consideration, time zones.
Mhm.
Um, because, like, obviously we have, great pals over at Garblog Games and Voice in the Baltic Star, both of which are predominantly UK outfits. And we are in the United States. Pat is presently on the West Coast, actually, but we've historically been an East Coast outfit. There's always the question of like, when do you run and how does it align with your viewers? Like, one of our most long-term viewers, Lerb, is from the UK, but she's a night owl, so she's not awake at UK times, which is why she's seeing our stuff that's going so late into our night. And there's a lot of little considerations, I would say.
How and if did you use your Twitch channel as a means to advertise the games and to make your games known to other people? Do you think that it is a good strategy to use your Twitch in that way as a marketing tool, or would you suggest people to keep it completely separated?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying this is good or bad, but there's a heavy expectation that you are going to bring up and bring and mention everything that you do
Okay.
on your Twitch channel, especially when you do something like a dev stream or a video game stream that's a little bit more low key. Like I streamed the whole original Deus Ex. I do some pathologic. I dev stream myself developing things, making change stars, making whatever. And it's just understood that you are going to have a certain closest. There are definitely people who like maintain their Twitch channel as just one thing, and there's an advantage to that, but there's also a disadvantage to that because if I had just been like a Fallout games only guy after I saw how many viewers I could get with it, I would have been punished if I ever chose to do anything else. Because the
Mm,
reality is, we weren't getting like 33, 35 viewers watching Change Stars or an unvarnished Acrody's Age RPG stream. We were getting them for Fallout in particular. And I I would say, yeah, you use it as a marketing platform, but the degree and extent to which you do is really about the unity between what do you do on your channel and what do they do, like what are you advertising? Like if you are someone who there's a genre of Twitch streamer who doesn't do a bad job, who doesn't do actual pleasurely speaking, but what they do on stream, and this is frequently a mixed category, like someone will do both. They just do DM prep and design on stream. Um, that genre and actual play genre are obviously very heavily overlapped with designers. I will say usually because of the ecology, if you aren't doing something 5e related, it's harder to make it. But we are seeing the D&D category slow down and sort of become a little bit more of a slow moving boulder. So there is definitely growth and opportunity, and there is a hunger and interest for other stuff. But, you know, at the end of the day, it is a long term engagement strat
mhm,
and it produces a lot of things that you can use. But the the overall like marketing platform potential which channel is you are activating highly activated users. Um, Someone who's still showing up to your Twitch stream is a highly activated user largely. And if they're not, they're interested because I mean, like, it doesn't take people even 5 seconds to click off of a stream if they don't find it interesting, which is a little nerve wracking because, like, if you have a long technical conversation about a rule that isn't interesting, or like, they just don't like your voice or whatever, like, it's all ogre, as
mhm,
they say. And it sucks because you think, oh, well, but there were these greater moments. And it's like, yes, but to capture those great moments, you do is you make a clip compilation, you get the clips, make the video, yada, yada. So you're signing yourself up for the work of streaming and editing if you want to really push the platform. I have historically been too busy both making games and doing live streams to do a bunch of video editing to my great penalty. So if there's one thing that I would suggest for anybody who wants to make an advertising platform, it is can't be your only one. It needs to be, and it probably can't even be your own video platform. If you have a TikTok or if you have a Red Note or if you have Instagram, if you have whatever, the YouTube shorts, and then like a traditional YouTube channel as well with your shorts, you want to release you want to tempt people in with like the finest nugget. And this is true in a sense for all streams, because they're going to get a sense for the best moments that the random people tuning in and out for zero point 0.5 seconds won't get because you didn't get that lucky. The stranger who gave you a chance who you didn't even realize that night did not tune in to the best moment. They tuned in while you were looking behind you going,
mhm.
for 10 seconds, which you can obviously try really hard not to do. But like, trust me, you can also go, you can really run yourself raw trying to leverage this platform and trying to be at the top of the game, so to speak. But the reality is exterior audiences make virtually every tabletop role playing game stream on Twitch. It is pretty much always an external audience. You need to have a community around the stream. You got to have a Discord, you got to have a social media presence, and you need to have some other reason besides I have a Twitch stream that people click on your Twitch stream. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Okay, so let's talk about those other reasons. Which are the games that you've been publishing for a while? Tell me a little bit about your design career. What kind of games do you like designing?
Ooh, so God, I mean, I've been designing games since I was a child, but I was a fairly stupid child. So I would always come up with mechanics, but I wouldn't intuit like how to make a turn system, even though like I played board games, it seemed pretty obvious in retrospect. But every time I tried to learn from a book, I would get mystified by a phrase like armor class or something. And ultimately, I didn't wind up playing a role playing game until my second first year of college, and my first game ever, and I will take this to the grave. My apologies to the creators, was Fate, and that forestalled my entrance into the hobby by about 9 months. Because fun fact about Fate, if you hand Fate to a group of people who've never played a role playing game before, it will frequently result in a failure to launch, which was precisely my experience. Um, the My next experience would be playing a 3.5 campaign and then running some Vampire the Masquerade. But my first like proper game that I ran a huge campaign of is an old, I believe, game design workshop game called Space 1889,
Why?
and it's because one day for esoteric reasons, even though we weren't like tabletop gamers, like a business associate of my father left a copy of Space 1889 at our house. It was relevant, I promise you. Point is, it had been just like lying around the house. I read it and I was like, whoa, this is a cool game. I should play it. And I played it. And the rest is history, I suppose, because one winter break, I hack out the combat system, which is, it's very much from an era where it's like, we're going to make a war game, we're just going to make a one model, but I hack it out to plug into the back end of the combat rules so that the entire items list, all the weapons and armor still work. No number changes.
Mhm.
And I've been doing it ever since. I mean, what kind of games do I like making? That's an interesting question. To me, there's a great unity of theme and mechanic. They tend to come to me simultaneously. I don't really see a heavy separation. Like even the fact that Ada is a D100 game is almost as characteristic of it of the fact that is Diesel Punk, for example. And there's, I mean, so we haven't been putting out a lot of role playing games like in terms of quantity. We've been working on ChangedStars. Ada predates my partnership with Pat, which is part of why it's pretty much no art. And we've been cooking ChangedStars for a long minute now. We did all of the art and the writing and play testing over the years. I would say that, I mean, like most designers, 99% of all game design ideas I have live either in my brain or mostly in my Google Drive. Um, Most of them do not see the light of day. I'm hoping to change that and get around to a fast turnaround, but coming up with a role playing game is like easy. Like I could do it with you here now. You know what I mean? Like it would take 10 seconds. You roll D4s, you want to get the lowest number possible, and every time you invoke a important memory with your friends that you've had along the way, you cross it off and forget it, but you get to minus your D4 by 2. Boom. Now, getting that to the point where I'm selling it as something that someone cares about, that's all of the work. That's all of the challenge. That's all of the blood, sweat, and tears. So, like, I guarantee you, I've got plenty of fucking tabletop games that no one will ever see or play because I have too many damn ideas.
Mhm.
My challenge is like accepting that they're never, if I don't drill down on one, none of them are coming out. Like, I really have to take it one at a time and keep myself focused, which is something I'm always challenged by because I have too many ideas. But I would say in terms of the games I really love designing the most, um, the more original the game is, mechanically and conceptually, and the more I feel it has like a distinctive set of experiences and how to put it, like, I don't want to say vibe, it feels like a little bit of a cop out, but I'm not really gassed to make yet another fantasy heartbreaker. Like, I don't have my own version of D&D, and I probably never will. It's just not. I don't sit down and think that that's really what I want to cook on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there are a lot of D&D out there already. It's yeah, all over the place.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I get that there's a lot of people who've made very good ones. I'm a fan of Kevin Crawford's games,
Mhm.
Without Number series.
Yeah.
Um, and I am a fan of like playing and running OSR games and even Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, in terms of what I design, not really what I'm after. And I like, in part because I don't like a lot of things about games like that. I don't like armor class. I don't like spongy hit points that infinitely grow, but I also don't really like. I enjoy D&D games the most when the HPs are below the ACs, actually, but I don't necessarily think that's a great fix either to what I see as a fundamentally not interesting damage system. So there's always something that I'm like pondering when I'm playing a game like that I'm like, I would rather it not be like this. Whereas when I play Fabula Ultimate, I don't feel that way. I feel like this is a pretty good game. I mean, as a game designer, I'm always inspired by these games to make other games, but particularly when it's like an original indie, I'm usually just enjoying it for what it is on some deeper level than I can otherwise.
Fair enough. Okay, let's dive in that case into change stance because obviously this is something that you have invested a lot of effort into because
Yeah.
it's a
Years.
big thing. Now, the first question I have is why hard science fiction? Isn't that a little bit harder to come to design than kind of fantasy science fiction or
Yes.
flexible science
Yes.
fiction?
My default with sci-fi is like I like space magic and psychic powers and all that kind of stuff. The real reason is that so Pat and I have like kind of like co-parented the setting for long enough that it's ours, collectively. But it is her baby, and she we made it as like a we wanted our friends to play Alien RPG with us, but our most reliable group that I've known since college, most of them that meets once a week for years now, pretty religiously, is not really. Even if they're a fan of the films, they're not really trying to spend a long time in the universe of Alien,
Right.
which wasn't a problem. We do the Alien Summer. We've got so many hours of us playing ARPG on the channel. Oh my gosh. Another good lesson in actual playing is there's a lovely Discord, unofficial Discord for fans of the RPG. The RPG Discord is lovely. People run it are pretty good folks, and that Discord provided a pretty wide playing pool of people interested in playing. And that's pretty important when you're an actual play channel that does a lot of one shots. You can get a lot of different people in, meet a lot of different folks, and that's how you get your name out there in a certain sense. But we wound up, I mean, the long and short of it is we were looking to replace a hard sci-fi setting without fantasy, but also Pat's associate's degrees in biology is sort of her preference to imagine real things in a way. I mean, she can tell you why all of the various species that have blue blood, for example, have it.
Okay.
Um, I don't know hemoglobins from my hemoglycogens, so I couldn't tell you. But like, there's a very strong understanding of how these things work. I'm like a child with a cookie jar. Every time I want a creature that has acid blood that will like melt through things, um, the way that the xenomorphs do. She's like, no, that can't really happen. natural acids don't really burn through things that fast, and if they did, they couldn't really be blood, yada yada. Um, you know,
So tell me a little bit about the lore of the game. What kind of universe is it based in? What's the pitch elevator for the world around the game?
so it is basically a is set 100 years after the kind of conflict that a normal hard sci-fi, particularly middle sci-fi story is set.
Okay.
Um, there is a conflict which there's a human empire which evolves out of the Martian Republic and more or less just snowballs into a fascist state that dominates humanity and then goes out to do a little free range genocide while continuing to expand. And eventually, they come upon the Mirai and this insectoid species they see and immediately both revile and assume will be easy to kill. What they not realize is that as they have been expanding, people have noticed, gotten a little concerned, armed up a little, made friends. The Thread Federation and them are in a de facto defensive pact. It was, presently logistical agreement that will become a defensive pact. And the human empire, neither knowing nor caring, goes and kicks off a fight, believing that they're just going to have like a test case for their bioweapon. They're going to wipe out the hive or like mind control the drones using a plague they've engineered, et cetera, et cetera. They don't really have that ready to go for the first attack. Um, but they set off the alliance and the war, and their resources to crush their own people who rebel get way too ground up in this huge fight. And they've way overexpanded into a region we call the frontier. And they are having to have this long, grindy front. And with the conflict that emerges, essentially, these alien polities fund and equip rebels while they're fighting against the human empire. So even though the human empire is, peak of the waste all our resources on killing people empire, they lose. Half the reason they lose really is fuel efficiency,
Okay.
because I am a logistics nerd. Um, but this is in part because the human empire is spread along something called Sunder's Rift, which is where a lot of dead star stuff is, which is where heavy matter comes from. And heavy matter is what you use and refine in your ship's engines to rip wormholes, which is the only means of going faster than light in the setting. And that's great, but it's also a problem because they are very far from their huge source of fuel that they were reliant on. Meanwhile, the Thorn Federation has had to find a way to make do with significantly less heavy matter. And this is reflected in the mechanics. Like the old Human Empire ships, which are still in service because it takes decades to build shipyards and it takes like years to build ships in the setting. Um, they have heavy matter recycling if they are not one of the old Human Empire ones. And that's literally like a chance to get back fuel you're spending on your fast and light travel. So the question of how much you're going to run out of. But the HMR and all those Human Empire ships is zero. It was nothing. They were just burning gas. So um, it's the kind of setting where it's both like a story of like defeating fascism and also a lesson in how fascism can produce fuel inefficiency. And most games like this would be set primarily during that time, during the war. You're rebels, you're fighting the empire, they're evil. Yes, which is good, which is good. But you've probably heard that story a few times. This is set 100 years after the fall of the empire, and it is about like another thing that it does that breaks indie game orthodoxy is there's a variety of frames. You can be anybody from science teams to Marines to ordinary people. We've done a Food Wars episode. Um, but the important bit is that the theme, you could say, is about winning the peace,
Mhm.
is about 100 years later when there's no longer such an easily understood evil to shoot. Uh, what are you doing? It's not that there aren't still like evil people or people to get into conflicts with, but with the empire gone, like how is it really going? Maybe the things that have been done in the wake of removing that empire were better, but they weren't always good. and this has born new grievances. And 100 years on, people could start to have very hazy, rosy recollections of something they weren't alive for. Which, with cryo, some of the original fascists can still be around with cryogenic sleep if they've been staggering it correctly. But broadly speaking, this is primo misremember territory, right? And reactionary elements can rely on some misunderstanding or rosy recollection and anti-alien sentiment, that sort of thing, and produce this environment where they might be able to get some separatist violence going on. And that's kind of the broad scale backdrop. There's a lot going on, but broadly speaking, the Trinity, the main polity where like most games are set, and the Rast Homeship Coalition, which are a group of otter-like species homeships that travel the stars and do space business, but are again in like a defensive pact sort of alliance, are kind of at the very beginning stage of a Cold War.
Mhm.
Violent separatist groups are sort of making their play across the frontier as it's clear that the Trinity is eventually going to catch up. Like quality of life is going to get too good, and the average foot soldier of a separatist cause is no longer going to be willing to die with a rifle in their hand, which is just less appealing when you have government mandated like Starbucks and a nice holography projector. Um, and pro Trinity sentiment is rising, but then there's also questions of there's Newsquai space, which is sort of here be dragons on the map out there as well. And a lot of those worlds have things like Imperial remnants or groups of marauders who operate out of worlds that have generally lower tech level, frequently because there's a local Newsquai warlord in the sector keeping it that way. And there's questions of, is expansion of our entity legitimate? And the answer right now is no. There's only defensive wars legal in the Trinity, and people can vote to join us, but they really have to control the thing that they're trying to join us with. Otherwise, you need to move here, right? Um, so you can't like go invade this place, yada yada. But then there's all of these Cold War shadow games going on, and there are questions about how legitimate is it even for our government to do that. There's a lot of rules in the Trinity. Um, there's pretty much freedom of information to an extreme extent. That I mean, we even mentioned in the book, even if it's like a military operation or a top secret spy thing, eventually it comes out. It's just a question of, how long the paperwork happens and how long it takes for information to transfer. Because we also don't, information doesn't go faster than stuff. And wormholes overwhelmingly only get ripped for ship travel, with the exception of like three planets that have micro wormholes for the three capitals of the species' historical qualities, and then the new one on Clear Sky that's the Trinity capital, right? Outside of those four systems, you get information at the speed that ships arrive from wherever the information came from. Pat sometimes describes it as an age of sail setting. Like you're really on your own island, and these ships are bringing these messages in the bottle and news of the outside world. You're not on the internet calling somebody on Mars if you're on Ichthys station. And because of the speed of travel, it takes literally over a year for something to get there, unless you shoot a rare and expensive comms missile, and those are only going to do it in a sixth of the time. So still, if you had an urgent message for Earth, months,
Mhm.
right? And that kind of informs the setting and how, yeah, like it's a happier future. There's better stuff, but when you get into that, you have these questions with utopian settings and games of like, where's the conflict? Where's the danger? Like, listen, there's a better world out there. The government is perhaps the first time in human history largely benevolent, and like, to the extreme of like you can probably rely on them to be the good guys. Not that like people can't interpret the game how they like, and you can have all sorts of different perspectives, but they're not all just because they're there and fairly strong doesn't mean they're there right now. Like it could take you months to years to have anybody show up in whatever system you're in the middle of the black out in the void when you were like in the middle of your wormhole tear and then somebody else arrived, yada yada. You multiple wormhole tears to get to places. And yeah, like what are you gonna do? It's you and the pirate now, baby. Like no one is even if you get that cosmos off, no one's showing up in an hour or 10 days. Like if you're lucky, it's a few months.
Mhm.
The fight's over. You won or lost, and then you lived with the consequences. They boarded, or they ripped out your reactor, or like they forced you into cryotubes and took you captive, or you killed them, or like you had a horrible spaceship shootout, and now both of your ships are uninhabitable, and you're trying to find a way to salvage between the two of them one survivable scenario. So there's a lot of room for danger that the hard sci-fi setting creates because if you think about it, magic in a lot of settings, and we can use magic here to refer to both like very high technology and like convenient technology, I should say, and like a fantasy setting. If it is a quote unquote high enough magic setting, the solution to any problem becomes like it's already been solved unless a sufficiently powerful entity is stopping it. No sufficiently powerful entity needs to be stopping you. The void of space is horrible and dangerous. I mean, we have rules for things like micrometeorites impacting your ship.
Mhm.
I ran a one shot all about like micrometeorite impacts, fallout, and having to like get the ship ready to turn its asteroid gun on more micrometeorites before they could impact the ship and really ruin it. There was no like living entity or thinking entity that was going against them. It was just the fact that, hey, buddy, you're in space. I hope a pebble doesn't hit you. You'd be fucked. Which is, part of the joy of this setting. And one of the themes at the top is dot 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 in space.
Mhm.
Ordinary people doing extraordinary things in space is kind of the whole tagline. And it's definitely a dangerous environment and you have all this stuff going on and it can be more hopeful because it's like yeah things are better, the trinity is a pretty good place, all these things are sort of on the up, so kind of like Star Trek and the Federation, you have this positive entity to be working towards the ideals of, and even if there is like a corruption or an inadequacy within it, that doesn't necessarily, it's not like one of those things where it's like, "Oh, actually, turns out, government was bad, guys. You thought it was good, but it was bad." And it's like, "Yeah, I've watched anime. I'm familiar with this plot. This will only be the thousandth time." Which, again, they're good. They're great. I love it. But I think that we provide a different backdrop, and I do not think that when you find, like, for example, like, hard sci-fi with like a lot of military background and like armor and spaceships that can shoot each other, you do not tend to find benevolent governments that are focused on reducing harm and providing the most good for the most people and autonomy and freedom and like focusing resources on the people, right? That's usually not what you get in those settings.
Okay. What are the rules like? What kind of rule set have you used?
So it is a D6 system.
Mhm.
You roll for success, and the only success is a six.
Mhm.
Now, the first thing a lot of people will be thinking is, oh, it's going to be too many dice, which fair enough, but there is a mitigating design factor, which is that you can pretty much always re-roll all of your dice that didn't roll a success. The catch is you gain an edge dice, which is nice because oh, you also rolled and also got six for success. But if it shows a one, that's a shock. And if you have multiple edge dice and you show multiple ones, that's an even worse shock.
Mhm.
And if you get any sort of a shock, you can't re-roll at all. So there is this ebb and flow and this push your luck of like, are you willing to gain edge for this? And edge is a state of like adrenaline rush and being on edge. Characters have an edge break, which is sort of a marquee like special ability that sort of you have your moment and stand out, and it is pretty guaranteed to work. There's no rolling to see if it succeeds. You're also almost guaranteed to have a level 3 shock, which is the worst level afterwards. And that'll put you out of a scene entirely. Like it put you in a catatonic state, you completely lose it. Uh, so there is always this ebb and flow and push and risk involved with how you are escalating the game for your own character's perspective. And there's ways to deal with it. And you can take drugs, you can absorb edge from your friends if you have the right talents, that sort of a thing, help mitigate. But in the course of a normal change stars game, unless the characters are very deliberately avoiding it, it's going to stack up, it's going to trigger, and you're going to do something amazing, like take out a boss in one shot, or like perform three instantaneous space actions, or like swing your sword and like all the people around you go down, and then you are going to have to suffer the consequences. And this will usually develop in a level 3 shock, which means you get a psychological trauma.
Mhm.
We don't delve too much into what they are or like the specifics, but what you do have to develop afterwards is a cope. And by default, you'll begin with a negative cope, and you'll need to transition via various means to a healthy cope. Negative copes are things like um, addictive compulsions and like being paranoid. And there are mechanical things for all the default provide ones, and we encourage people to come up with their own. And then there are healthy copes, which are things like a support group, a hobby, you know what I mean? Meditation. And as long as you have access to the healthy cope, you are okay. And if you don't have access to it, you'll eventually regress to the negative cope. So that is kind of the broad scope of it, is that you're going to be under stress, you're going to be under anxiety, and you're going to be having these adrenaline rush moments, and your characters are going to you'll have to decide, how much do I want to fix this machine? Is it willing to push right now? I'm willing to push right now. I'm willing to reach right now. I'm willing to get my rolls right now. But they're like, I'm shooting this enemy. Is it worth reaching right now? Do I need the extra twist, which is what we call additional successes, to do more damage, or to suppressing fire, or to full auto extra guys, try and get the super twist, which is three extra successes and cause someone to bleed by shooting them. Like, are those things worth it right now, or am I going to be stacking on my edge too soon? Am I going to be in an untenable scenario? If you ever reach 10 edge, you either faint, or you're is if it's triggerable at all, your edge break triggers. And usually you have to be at 7 to trigger your edge break, but you can do it at 5 with humans. And there is just this the ebb and flow that kind of mechanically dictates the game is how much edge do you have? Because the more edge you have, the more likely you are to succeed. But the more edge you have, the more likely you are to suffer a shock. No edge, no chance of shock. But also, I mean, the dice pools have been designed around the fact you get this reroll. So your odds of success are they're not bad, strictly speaking, but like as anyone will tell you who's thrown some D6s looking for only a 6, frequently frequently not a lot of the time you're going to be like, no, actually I wanna roll again. And it's too easy. You're playing a game where you roll and succeed, and I tell you, hey, you could roll again. Of course you say yes.
Fair enough, indeed. What kind of characters can people create?
So we have a lot of freedom in terms of character generation. And like I said, we played everything from like uh people who work in a restaurant and just like doing like a day of like a slice of life, to like special ops operations, to like a Star Trek style science team. So the concept is, I hope, very broad. Concepts are very broadly supported, but in terms of what we've like physically given you, there are, I really do have to go back and count them. 7 species,
Okay.
8 if you want to count the variant synth, and those are the human, the deer-like horned thren, the insectoid mirai. Those 3 are the primary species of the Trinity, although the Trinity welcomes all species. Like the historical polities that came up out of those species are what have combined into the Trinity. The Rast, who are cuddly otter friends, Newsquai adolescents, which Newsquai, like, they're kind of like a lobster. They have biological immortality. They keep growing forever. And eventually in nature, they'll like a lobster, they're crushed under their own shell. But this is the space future, and some of them have cyberware that eject inside themselves, and now they've been living for centuries. The Veer, who are kind of like a rhino skinned beetle
Mhm.
species, high grav species. And then there are synths, who are synthetic human beings or other, facsimile of creatures, are just like a robot, you know what I mean? And they are actually, the default synth doesn't have the edge system. They have a entirely different system of spending processing. It totally changes how you play the game. Now, some people want to play a robot and not do that. They still, because like we got the feedback that like it felt like they weren't getting to play with part of the game, and that was kind of a bummer. So the variant synth is sort of suggested for newcomers who want to have the full quote unquote full change stars experience before getting into that. Um, and so across those species, before we even get too deep into what they do, there are a number of archetypes, and really, this game is a classless system wearing a class system trench coat because yeah, there are 9 archetypes, and I think I even had 12 at once compared. No, sorry, there are there is still 12. I they just don't have the other page. Um, but really, if you go and look at, there's 3 types of archetype. They're explained in the custom tags talents paragraph, and basically, if you look at any of them, and it says like officer, tag attribute empathy. And you're like, okay, but I would actually like to be an officer who's really swift or really sharp. And I want to tag cognition, and tagging lets me put my maximum and my points on that stat 1 point higher. Do I have to do like a whole bunch of things? Like, do I have to go find the right? No, any one-to-one substitution is perfectly fine in CareGen. So whatever talent, whatever focus skills, all that matters is the flow of the thing, basically. You can only double up in one area. You can have 2 tag attributes, you can have 4 instead of 2 focus skills, or you can have 2 starting talents. Um, and the archetypes that the game gives you are basically just I've gone through the most common things I think people want to be: medics, officers, marauder for melee fighter, marine for ranged fighter, mechanics, hackers, investigators, pilots, sneak scientists, that sort of a thing, and just like furnished you with it. But as I build pre-gen for adventures, even I don't stay strictly inside these bounds, and I hope that people push outside of them because Change Stars somewhat uniquely as an indie game, and we were told multiple times not to do this by a lot of people in the arena. Um, but you pretty much have to make a game about a singular experience. The tabletop role playing game must be about like I don't know, friends trying to escape an evil diner in the 70s or something. Like you need a very tight pitch about what the whole game is. It needs to be fairly either short campaign or one shot based. It's not Change Stars at all. Change Stars is great for one shots, but it's also for multi-session. It's also for campaign play. It's also for long-term play. You're going to have the ebb and flow of resources, of psychological trauma and cope, of learning skills, of gaining new talents, of the different builds and synergistically that you can build with talent trees, which are these they're more of a talent bush really, but basically like there's like these categories of ability that lets you do something unique or give you bonus in certain circumstances. And there's a first tier and a second tier. So for example, being able to make melee attacks as a side action is a tier 2 of the bruiser tree, but you might get block or dodger or red typhoon first, which lets you, block better, dodge better, or distribute your melee hits across all targets within range. There's a number of synergies here as well. One of the edge breaks is you are already dead, which allows you to do a side action and pump all the dice that you would roll succeed automatically on your melee attack. You walk into a group of people, you have red typhoon, you activate your edge break. Now you have a straight sixes roll to distribute across everyone in range. So there's a lot of, and you can imagine that there's a lot of ways that you can do builds here and you can augment stuff. And yeah, so there's a lot of depth, and I think that things are very up to interpretation. Like if something is this order or command, there's people who are like, playing a character who's giving advice or even being comedic relief, or like there's something about them that is like augmenting whatever everyone else is doing and helping guide them, even though the relationship isn't necessarily what that implies immediately. And I hate to be a Todd Howard, but it just works, really is how I would describe my experience with the system. There is something here for pretty much anyone who wants to go on a space adventure or an adventure in general. You're going to be able to specify into healing people, into helping people, into doing science, into hacking computers, into piloting, into shooting, into whatever you really want to do. And it's I would say one thing that makes is different about the game from games like D&D is a system that does not assume that everyone is equivalently a fighter or that all scenarios are equivalently intended to be handled with violence. So it's not like in D&D where it's like pick any class, you're going to be useful in combat. I'm not going to say anyone becomes useless
Mhm.
in such a scenario, but like you're deciding whether or not you want to be good at shooting people and beating people up, or if you want to be good at like other things. There's overlap scenarios, there's overlap usefulness, but melee and ballistics are two of the skills. But so are systems, so is scrutiny, so is operate, which is for piloting. Like you're making a choice there. And part of the challenge of designing the game was ensuring everyone had pretty much any way you could build a character had a meaningful role to interface with space engagements. Like when the fire is on the spaceship and you're in the expanse situation with the holes being plugged in your hull, does your character, who is like a poet, have something meaningful to do? And the answer is yes. The hardest one to answer was the face archetype, sort of, we're all in on speech and related abilities. And yeah, you do have a variety of things that you can do that can help people. And it's, it was not easy, but I feel strongly that we basically built a game to simulate our fictional universe,
Mhm.
and we want to make it easy for people to play whatever game they want within it. And I mean, there are people who feel it's too broad, and some feedback we've gotten is our modules that we put out are too designed to be used by anyone because we have a bunch of hooks and frames and explanations for any party could wind up doing it. And they're like, this doesn't really launch me into the world. So I am going to be working on starter pad modules for each of the frames that we have that I've mentioned earlier that you can find the Dream Weaver guide to describe like here's advice for if you want to run like a marine campaign and what's going on. I might do that. Here's the free merchant frame. Here's what these kinds of crews are like. Here's what it's like to, do trade business in what is in many places. It's not post scarcity, but like it's not a capitalist society, you know what I mean? Like business isn't booming. You can just like have a place to live and food without, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
You're not worried about cash. It's like what motivates people, and it spaces the people out of time. You're not going to age the same as other people because you spend most of the voyage in cryo, and you're going to spend years away. You might not even return to your home planet. What motivates somebody who has their needs taken care of to go do that? Well, item one, maybe they're on a frontier planet where things are still kind of, and they're barely holding on to like a failed terraforming project or something from the legacy of human empire, materialist expansionism, which was, companies were lying about their long term plans and always burning everything for the short term profit. And the empire and the megacorps were doing it. And now they've inherited it. And it's like, well, now we have a very horrible long term project that we need to fix. And fixing things is frequently a longer and harder process than breaking things or grabbing them or stealing them, which is what the empire relied on for their growth, right? And the
Mhm.
Trinity is a different sort of entity. And there's yeah, sorry, I guess I got sidetracked there. But what I'm saying is the ebb and flow of the game is um, presumes that you're going to either use one of these frames or more or less think of your own in terms of you need to probably pitch your players on what you're going to be doing. And it's like, are you going to have the Firefly experience where you're going around kind of doing business, kind of doing safe stuff, but in the end of the day, you're good guys? Are you going to be like, is it like aliens? You wake up and you're like, it's time for another bug hunt? Is it going to be, crawling around in alien worlds, trying to find different species and catalog them? All of these are fun ideas, and the game can simulate all of them. Although they will feel different to play, you will be able to play the same game with the same rules, and it will handle them.
Let's talk a little bit about the production value. You mentioned at the beginning of the interview how previous games, artwork is very expensive. How have you gone about producing all the artwork and all the layout for this game to make it better than all the productions that you may have had in the past?
Yes, well, I would like to preface this by saying that this is an idea that probably occurs to all writers and is generally speaking non-replicable, which is unfortunate. But I will leave you with a hopeful note. The answer is we never could have afforded with a 15K Kickstarter before the government and Kickstarter took their cuts to make a book with this much art. It never would have happened. Pat is the artist. Pat did all of the not the layout, did all of the art and color art. Casey, they are a wonderful layout artist, and they are a friend and a player in a game that's been running for since at least like the second year at the latest of our channel existing, High Road, which runs on Mondays, um, they basically did a very favorable friends and family rate to do the layout, and they are a like formally educated layout artist. Um, and so the beautiful layout is because we got really fucking lucky and we knew someone who was willing to work for frankly less than we would have been able to pay them in a just world. And uh, we have far more art than an indie with our funding can afford because, well, I mean, our game took literal years, and one of the people who makes it is an artist. Has been making the art the whole time, um, which is good for us now that it's done, but it's not replicable or advisable. Now,
Mhm.
is it? I will say this, particularly in this time when there is this scourge of Gen AI and questions of integrity and best practices around that, we do have a lot of stock art. Because Pat has been a very prolific artist and she can churn out a lot of really quality stuff now. We have everything from dark fantasy to cyberpunk. And just we're getting an item pack right now. We have fantasy locations. We're going to work on other types of locations and we have them in very agreeable bundled amounts. I mean, as we speak, there's a 40% off sale. I don't know when this will go live, but there will be more sales in the future. Let me put it that way. We're looking at seasonal sales, and yeah, across our H catalog and our Diesel Shot drive through, you can find all sorts of packs, dinosaurs, that sort of a thing. And stock art is really underrated, especially if you go for black and white stock art and like you kind of like lean traditional, you can get functionally unlimited art. Nemo, who creates um a lovely game called Zen Never Dies, which I haven't thought about in forever. But it's really cool and could basically teach a master class on reusing art because the art for that game is beautiful and there's been a lot of very clever retellings
Mhm.
and this has been done using recoloring a lot of the time. I was shown and basically if you just kind of get like ultra clean digital line work that allows you to select and color fill on the blank sections.
Mhm.
Boom. Like you may not be an artist, but you can still probably pick colors. And it's like a coloring book with a fill tool.
Mhm.
And you can crop if you have standalone pieces of art with transparent backgrounds, you can just arrange it in front of them. If you have like a mascot character or species or animal or something, that's really good. Um, so there's stock art, there's that. You can look into things like vector art and things that kind of do themselves, so to speak, without like there's ways for there to be procedural generation without it being generative AI
Mhm.
that is taking what someone else has done.
Yes.
And those solutions are good. I also haven't read it, but I hear good things. We public access is a role playing game that has no art inside at all, just the cover art, and it's a damn good layout. And the painful truth is you got to learn layout. Trust me, I'm crying as I lay out these modules. You gotta learn layout. It's one of those things. It's like you can't just be a writer unless you are part of a bigger paid operation where someone else is doing the layout, which I've done. I write for Demila's Wondrous Works. I write the encounters for her maps. They're beautiful,
Mhm.
and they've just now recently in the past months gone to system agnostic, which means there's a lot more room to flex my creative muscles because we don't particularly say D&D or Pathfinder Second Edition, which we were both supporting out sometime. And now just like I can be creative and then we can throw in suggestions for what the modules should be for both systems and call it a day. But that's you're not going to be able to push your own thing or get into like a ruinous situation as just a writer. You need to be able to lay out, and if you lay out good enough, you actually debatably don't even need art. Sorry, continue.
How can people buy the game? When is it going to be available? Where is it?
It's available right now on
Mhm.
dieselshot.itch.io. Diesel like the fuel, shot like taking a drink.
Okay.
and dealshot.itch.io has all our stuff. There's a free video game on there. The Load is a free adventure that's on there as well. And Change Stars is there. When it is not on sale, Change Stars PDFs are $30. Physical copies are 50 if you find me in person, or 50 plus shipping if not, which particularly for anyone outside the US right now is regrettably God, I sent a review copy to someone and
Ouch.
whoa. It's
So it's one of
sending a label is now over $40.
yeah, it is one of the reasons why I used to have a policy about I don't review anything unless it's physical, because otherwise I will be getting so many PDFs it would be impossible for me to manage. But I had to stop saying that to people because I know that oftentimes nowadays shipping is more expensive than producing the book itself.
Yep. I mean, if we had a $40 price per unit, we couldn't have even appealed to our backers. We could have barely to, I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous. And just, all I can say is I'm thankful that we managed to get ours out the door just in time
Mm,
before this stuff hit. And our friends across the globe have their book. Um, but yeah, and I mean, this is one of the struggles, which is that most games will live and die digitally. And after the experience of getting the physical book made, I can honestly say I'm never doing that shit again. The closest I would ever come is making print friendly
yeah,
and offering pod,
yeah.
because it's a whole struggle. It's a whole set of skills that are not really related to my creative passions or desires. And I mean, for me and my friends, these things are digital. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like even if we own a physical copy, occasionally it'd be more advantageous to leaf through, but with good hyperlinking, we don't. They're PDFs to us, which is somewhat sad to say because like they are beautiful as physical books, but in many ways, I think the physical book is entering the state of a
Decline.
nicety.
Yeah.
I think the big fan has, but that the average user does not. Which I mean, there's positives and negatives to that. But from my perspective, like we're talking about doing a lot of things. I'm talking about editing video. I'm talking about live streaming. I'm talking about writing and prepping all of those games. Talking about making video. In addition, I have to make games. Like you got to draw the line somewhere. And oh well, big mega company does this. Why not you? Is like well, the line's got to come somewhere.
Mm,
Like I'm sure a lot of these companies are going to find ways to produce. You know what I mean? Like if you make the book in the jurisdiction, you don't have to import the book, if you see what I'm saying.
yes.
So a lot of people are going to split production runs, things like that. And those that can be accessible to smaller people, but realistically, there's a certain degree of privilege to be like, this is too much. I'm out. Or they already have, yeah, if you're sitting on inventory, but you need to ship right now, ooh, that's a big oof.
Mm,
So sorry,
mm,
but Change Stars is on our drive-through and our itch, and you can find us a deal shot at both locations. And the book is usually $30 for the PDF, which is boots the price of your PDF. We have a generous preview on drive-through, so you can see it. There's a quick start, although it's a lot dated. And we're working on a new one on drive-through, and I really hope you give it a look. And community copies will be coming available as we finish the very final top-level Kickstarter things that we need to do. And so those will be available, and right now on sale, it's $18. So look for the sales if you are thinking 30 is a little steep, and check out the game because I guarantee you, I mean, it's a 306-page PDF, realistically 304-page book. That's a front and back cover, and I obviously think it's worth it. But really, we got everything. There's a back of the book adventure. There's a Dreamweaver's guide on how to run the game. There's artifacts. There's items. There's species. There's a whole bestiary. There's like lore. There's planet emoji. There's little symbols representing the systems and chains. We got everything.
Well, I very much look forward to the resounding success of the game and whatever else may come from you in the hopefully not too distant future, which I'm sure that you will have plenty getting in the works.
Yes.
Excellent. Ali, thank you very much indeed for being with me today. This has been absolutely excellent. I really am looking forward to taking a deeper look and finding out a great deal more about everything that you are currently doing and will in the future. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Done. Interview over. How do you feel that went?
Yeah, it was good.